Mace Tyrell just dropped a hot new single, Drogon entered himself into the fighting pits, and hey, Dorne was there too. Tonight we're discussing Game of Thrones episode 509, The Dance of Dragons, on What's on the Box! Hi, I'm James.
And I'm James.
And this is What's on the Box, where we discuss the latest episode of your favorite TV show.
We go from some really epic fantasy last week to some really epic tragedy this week.
What was so tragic about burning a small child alive?
You know what? You're right. Totally comedic. I just didn't get the joke until just now.
Her screams were the punchline.
Ooh.
But in all seriousness, that was one of the most difficult things to watch in the show, which I feel like I said earlier this season.
This one almost hit me a little bit harder than Sansa. It's hard not to compare the two because they're both so difficult to watch and they both invoke such strong reactions after the fact. I think that what made the difference for me was the screams were just so intense and so real.
Yeah, that was definitely what sold that moment. That last scream that pitches up before she falls silent. So this is obviously controversial because Game of Thrones, but I think that it falls in line with Stannis' character. And I know you didn't at first, but have since changed your mind.
Yeah, this scene was capital G great because it invoked such strong feelings while watching it, and I've been thinking about it pretty much constantly since Sunday night. And I think that is something that good drama should do, even though there's a lot of controversy because a little girl gets burned alive. But like you said, it's in line with his character. He's done it before. He did it with Mance.
He murdered his own brother with a shadow baby. He was gonna burn Gendry alive before Davos rescued him. I'm also wondering if maybe audience members are struggling with the moral ambiguity of a character because I mean, Stannis hasn't always been a favorite, but they definitely were building him up like that in this season, giving him more wry humor in his lines and that scene with Shireen earlier, and then he goes and burns his daughter alive. And I think that people just wanted a good guy to root for, which we haven't had maybe since Robb.
It's this, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, but it's twisted in that he views that he's the one who's going to be the savior for all these people. And in the micro sense right now, he truly 100% believes that in order to keep his army alive, keep these thousands of people alive, he has to sacrifice Shireen.
And here's the question. If it turns out that he's right and that Melisandre has been correct about all this Lord of Light stuff, is it justified?
That's a big ethical question.
But I like that the show raises that, and I want people to be able to think about that kind of stuff before just seeing something that is, in all circumstances, morally repugnant, and instead of just like immediately reacting and saying, I can't watch this show anymore, think about it, I guess.
In a similar way to what happened with Sansa earlier in the season, I think that the way in which the show deals with this decision going forward is going to be very important.
Yeah, I want to see him struggle with having to have done that.
If we get a real psychological struggle with Stannis going forward, that's going to add a lot of depth to this and I think allow the audience to kind of understand it better.
And we've already seen some signs of that. I mean, I saw some people online wondering if Stannis was drunk when he came in to talk to Shireen, and while I don't think that's to be taken literal, it might as well have been. He's a man who is just trying to cope with this and doing it poorly, and he looks haggard at the pyre scene. I saw a comparison of him there and him back in season 2, and it's like he's aged 2 decades. And I like that we saw that, and I hope that we see him continuing to struggle with that difficult decision.
It was horrible. It was horrible to watch. That doesn't mean that they shouldn't have done it. That doesn't mean that it's bad. It's tragedy. And people have to die in a tragedy.
How do you feel about Selyse having her moment of turnaround right there at the end?
I thought that was a good character moment.
It came a little sudden for me. I mean, I know it was when Shireen started calling out for her.
I don't know, I thought it was a good humanizing moment, and I think that just like Theon in the Sansa scene, we needed an audience avatar. And when it becomes clear that Stannis isn't gonna give us anything, Selyse lets us kind of have that cathartic moment.
Although I do think a lot of the members of Stannis' army were pretty disapproving. And it makes me wonder, even if this gives him some kind of godly strength or whatever to go on and let's say he takes the Iron Throne, did he just ruin his own chances at ruling by doing this? Because it looks like his army was pretty, at least some of them were disgusted by this. You know that Davos is going to be pissed about this, even if, and I think this is true, some part of him knew that that's what was going to happen when he left. I mean, he gave her the gift. It was very meaningful looks. It was like a last look at her before he left. But who in the realm is going to support a guy who burnt his own daughter at the pyre, especially for a god that many of them don't believe in? This is not the faith of the Seven that we're talking about. This is a newfangled Lord of the Light from Essos.
I keep thinking about Tyrion's earlier line.
A ruler who kills those devoted to her is not a ruler who inspires devotion.
I don't know what else really to say. It was disturbing, and it took a character who I still love because he is a deeply conflicted person who has all of these flaws but still believes in something. And yeah, he's not a good guy. He wasn't introduced as a good guy. He's not going to be the good guy. But I like scenes with Stannis, and I hope we get more.
There was some other disturbing stuff in the episode. First, let's talk about Dorne.
Dorne happened.
I think Dorne happened in the best happening of this whole Dornish season.
And it would have been great if that was episode 4.
Agreed. Totally agreed. But I think that both scenes that we got in Dorne were very enjoyable. Both the meeting with Prince Doran, who was fucking awesome.
Yeah, Duran's great.
And the jailhouse scene reprise.
Am I going to be happy at the end of this walk? Great. That's a really great line.
And I liked the moment between Tyene and Nymeria where we actually got to know them in a natural way.
Yeah.
Instead of them saying, my name's Tyene, here's my backstory.
Yeah.
We had their interaction and we got to know Nymeria as like a fast, agile, arrogant kind of fighter who's taunting. Reminds me of Oberyn in his arrogance, which ultimately led to his downfall.
Yep.
And then Tyene continuing with her mind games like she did with Bronn in the previous episode, and ultimately overcoming Nymeria because of it. And it was efficient, and it was fun and enjoyable, and it took us 9 episodes to have that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that was really great characterization. It was really well written, and it was everything you said. But this is episode 9. And then what really makes it even more frustrating for me is that great scene with Doran basically negated everything.
Oh.
Because he's like, all right, Jaime, we'll send Myrcella back with you, but can you take Trystane with you? Great. All's well. There's probably something else going on there. I doubt that it's going to be wrapped up that tidy, but it's still episode 9 of a 10-episode season where we have all of this story that we're trying to get in, and this is the first time that anything even remotely good happens in Dorne. Time is a limited resource on Game of Thrones, and when they use it poorly, more than probably any other show I watch, it's upsetting. Because that is time taken away from another character that I'd rather be watching, such as Arya.
Oh, nice transition there.
Thank you.
Arya sees Meryn Trent, a man on her list. He's a bad guy, right?
Yeah, they definitely let us know that he's a bad guy.
Because I wasn't sure.
I wasn't sure if he was a bad guy after he brutally beat Sansa. Good thing he's a sexual predator, too.
That was another rough scene, man. The look on the little girl's face is horrible. Oh, I guess this kind of shit happens.
That's a very reductionist argument, I think, that the showrunners and George R.R. Martin have made of, like, there are bad things that happen to women in a world like this, but I just don't think that hammering that point home in that way was necessary. It would have been enough for Arya to see him at the brothel with a younger girl and overhear that he'll be back tomorrow for another one. I think that to drag that scene out with younger, and let us feel that we've already seen a little girl burning to death was a little bit too much.
I mean, the first time I watched it, yeah, I definitely felt that way. I was like, why are they doing this? I get that he's a bad guy. But I don't know, I guess I softened on it a little bit because it's built up to it. In Arya's first scene, she is introduced to being sexually threatened by those Bravosi on the street. Or as our friend Ross put it, a girl learns about rape culture. And I feel like that's setting it up for what she later sees. And I'm assuming that Meryn's appetite is going to play into Arya's revenge against him.
There's some serious foreshadowing. It's one of the problems with episodic reviews of television is that this is the plant and we have to wait for the payoff. So in the moment it's disgusting, but provided that this ends the way we expect it to, we'll all be cheering. So, I don't know. I just thought that they laid it on a little thick.
It was pretty thick.
And that scene could have been half as long and still been just as effective.
All I know is that I think Sexy Jesus knew exactly what was going on. And I don't think he'll be too pleased if Arya strays from the task he gave her. Well, anyway, the last big thing of this episode was the last big thing of this episode, and Meereen with the fighting pits!
Yeah, I had some tonal problems with Meereen. To go to this big epic fight sequence after being truly disturbed by the other two major plot points of the episode, it just didn't gel with me, especially after last week's perfect episode.
It was a lot lighter, partly because Tyrion's there. He's having a fun time.
Tyrion's not having a fun time.
You're right. Tyrion's like, I'm surrounded by idiots.
He tears apart his Dar, which is great. He looks at Dario like he's a fucking moron.
Which he is.
Yeah, I hate Dario. He's there for Dany. He advises Dany. I think that's one of the better moments of the whole sequence when he tells her that she can stop it, and his Dar says, no, she can't, talking to Tyrion, but Tyrion only refers to Dany. He has a moment of heroism where he saves Missandei, so really good sequence for Tyrion all around. Other than that, this is the next fight sequence we see after Hardhome.
I don't know, I think the Harpies coming out of the crowd and circling them was intimidating and it was harrowing. I think the vocals that they used on the track when the Harpies first emerged was a bad choice.
You made the excellent point before we started taping that will ruin this episode forever for me.
This sequence is just like in Attack of the Clones, the Battle of Geonosis. It's the same thing. They're in a big arena, the heroes end up in the center of it, they're getting encircled by the enemy, and then something comes from the air and rescues them. It's the same thing. I'm sorry. Dragons are cooler than clone troopers.
Everything's cooler than clone troopers.
Not Ewoks.
No, I will. That's a different discussion.
Were you gonna say I'll defend Ewoks?
Versus clone troopers.
That's a different discussion then.
There were really nice moments in this sequence. It was exciting that there was this kind of big conspiracy and this, terror plot that comes to fruition here. There's a mystery element to it with what appears to have been a red herring where his Dar comes in and says, just making sure everything's ready, but then he gets stabbed.
And he's dead, all right? I saw some people saying, well, maybe they're just faking that. No, we were watching him writhing on the ground with holes in his chest. I think he's dead.
The handhold between Missandei and Daenerys was really nice. That was a very good moment of terror and acceptance and friendship between the two of them.
It's like the Toy Story 3 moment. But I think it was undercut by the fact that 30 seconds later, Dany just pieces out on her dragon and is like, good luck, guys.
Well, let's talk about Drogon.
Okay.
I loved it. I thought it looked amazing.
I think most of it looked amazing. I think that first shot of him coming through the fire in the sky looked a little cheap and dampened my excitement. I mean, the rest of the sequence, it looks amazing. But I just wish they would have used a different first shot, because I think when we rewatch this in a few years, we're gonna be like, yeah, that one stands out. And then later on, she's flying away and the arena's in the background and it looks like rear projection. But everything aside from those two singular shots, I think looked amazing. I don't want it to sound like I'm naysaying this. I had such a fun time watching Drogon burn people alive.
There was kind of a theme, I guess. When Dany does get on his back and ride away, that's a triumphant moment, which just ties back into my frustration about tone in this episode. That's a cheer moment. And we watched a kitchen girl get led away by a pedophile and a little girl get burned to death.
It's a tough thing to do because, like you said, time is of the essence. You can't just say, hey, just throw that in the next episode. Next episode's the last one.
Right.
I think we're only getting nitpicky with this episode because of how perfect Hardhome was.
Yeah.
I think maybe after Hardhome, this is the best of the season.
This season took so long to get going and then hit such a high note with Hardhome that I think that both of us were kind of hoping that it would just ride that through to the end. And I really like David Nutter as a director. He's one of my favorite TV directors. He did a bunch of X-Files that I love. He did The Red Wedding and a couple other great episodes of Game of Thrones, and he's directing next week's episode as well.
Would you call it the letdown?
No.
Okay.
I won't call it a letdown. I guess I seem a little bit more critical than I truly feel.
Yeah, and I just don't want our audience to think that we feel that way.
No, this was, like you said, this was not a bad episode of Game of Thrones.
We'll see, though. There's a lot to wrap up, man.
There's so much that we need to see next week.
Yeah, I don't know how they're going to do it, but I guess we'll just wait and see. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. We still have Mother's Mercy next week.
Yes, we
The
do.
Season 5 finale. But until then, I'm James.
And I'm James.
And this has been What's on the Box?
Man, this sucks. Are you gonna subscribe?
Our videos are so great.
We don't choose which videos we love.
The Lord of Light says you should subscribe, my king.
Subscribing begins at sunrise.
Subscribe.
You love that video.
If I'm going to subscribe, let it be while there's still episodes left.